This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Beginning the show is Josh Ritter, Kansas FSA Farm Loan Chief, explaining policy changes that are taking place at the Farm Service Agency and how they could impact farmers and ranchers. K-State's Logan Simon and Augustine Obour continue today's show as they talk about research that has been done looking into the use of strategic and occasional tillage in different systems. The Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Bob Larson, Brian Lubbers, Phillip Lancaster, and Dustin Pendell wrap up today's show with a segment from their Cattle Chat podcast where they conversed about if producers can change their feedlot heifers into heifers for breeding. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show talking with Josh Ritter from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And Josh is the Farm Loan Chief. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Josh, some significant changes coming to FSA's farm loan programs, and you can tell us a little bit about what are those upcoming changes?
Yeah, so last month, our USDA announced the Enhancing Program Access and Delivery for Farm Loans rule, which is scheduled to go into effect on Wednesday, September 25th of this year. Once effective, that rule is going to provide notable policy changes to FLP repayment options, security requirements, and loan servicing options available to our borrowers.
What do you mean by FLP repayment option changes?
Yeah, one of the main points of the new rule is to provide more flexibility for repayment terms offered to our customers. That's going to include having the potential to offer smaller interest-only payments at the beginning of the loan term, which should result in our customers having more cushion built into their operations repayment plan. By creating more margin in the operations cash flow, hopefully our borrowers are going to have the opportunity to increase their working capital reserves and potential savings. And those savings, that could be something that could be used for retirement or education or things of that purpose.
You've mentioned what the changes to FLP repayment options are going to be, but what about those security requirements are going to be different?
Yeah, currently our regulations require additional security of up to 150% for most of our new loans. Under this new rule, we are lowering pledged collateral to not more than 125%, which means less land, crops, and equipment are going to be tied up securing FSA loans, and that property can be used instead to access capital from other lenders. Under the new rule, FSA is going to also reduce the frequency borrowers must use their personal residence as additional security for a farm loan. So, and also in most cases, personal property is not going to be required to be pledged as additional security for real estate loans, which is a big change from where we've been previously.
So really looking at all agriculture farm assets and not the personal assets for getting these loans? Yeah,
that's what we're kind of moving more towards. We used to have to, as part of our regulations, if we didn't meet the 150% requirement for security, we'd have to take a lien on a personal residence. This rewrite's kind of helping us get away from that in some of those instances, so we're not tying up somebody's home with our loans.
Previously on Agriculture Today, we've discussed a loan option that doesn't require any additional security, and is this option still going to be something that's available under this new rule?
Yeah, for sure. Under our current regulations, the down payment farm ownership loan doesn't require any additional security. As part of that program, a 5% down payment is required by the customer. Under the new rule, that loan option is still going to be available to beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, and veteran farmers. But the new rule also expands on that concept. Beginning on September 25th, if a customer is able to make a 5% cash down payment on any farm ownership or real estate type loan request, then additional security is not going to be required for that loan. It should be noted that 100% financing is still available under a regular farm ownership program, but this new rule will provide options to our customers that can make that 5% down payment.
So really just adding more options in for farmers with less liens on personal property?
Yeah. I think one of the big transitions here is we're trying to tie up less of a person's property. So that's what kind of where these are geared.
So Josh, what new servicing options are going to be available to farm loan borrowers?
Yeah, one of the main changes is going to be the establishment of the Distressed Borrower Set-Aside Program. Under this program, financially distressed borrowers can defer up to one annual loan installment per qualified loan at a reduced interest rate. This program is similar to our disaster set-aside program that's already in place, but it's not going to require a declared disaster for a borrower to be eligible. The belief is that this new distressed borrower set-aside program will provide a simpler and expedited option to help temporarily resolve financial distress. Another option under this new rule is to provide more flexibility to FSA to release liens on excess collateral that customers provided as additional security when they made their loan. Among other requirements, to meet this provision, the borrower is going to have an established history of on-time payment, and the outstanding FSA loan will still need to be secured at or above 125%. But we're expanding those options where we have way more collateral than what we need for our borrowers to be able to get our liens released so they can use that collateral for other purposes.
Do we know what's going to be the qualifications for having a distressed borrower set-aside program?
We're still kind of getting some of the details for that. But part of it's going to be that distressed borrowers having trouble with their cash flow. I mean, that's going to be a big part of the eligibility requirement. So,
are there going to be any changes on the IT side of things for this new program?
Yeah, just last week, USDA announced the launch of the debt consolidation tool, which is a new tool available through Farmers.gov that allows ag producers to enter their farm operating debt and then evaluate potential savings that might be available by obtaining a loan either through FSA or a local lender. This tool is designed to provide producers with potential options to structure their debts in a manner that affords them the opportunity to meet the goals of their operation and build financial equity. Along with that debt consolidation tool, there's also a loan assistance tool available on Farmers.gov that provides customers with an interactive online step-by-step guide to identifying those FSA loans that may be a fit for their needs. The tool also kind of explains the application process that you're going to have to go through to apply for an FSA FLP loan. While these tools are great, especially for our more tech-savvy customers, I'd still encourage our customers to reach out to their local FLP offices to discuss their options as well. But just another option out there if somebody's on the computer, I don't know, maybe bored's not the right word, but just curious about FLP loans, they can go to farmers.gov and some of these tools will be there, pop up for them to help them with those options.
So Josh, as we're thinking about these different changes that are coming with the Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Program, nothing major, but really there to hopefully help the farmer move forward with their farming operations?
Yeah, it's going to be some big changes probably to some behind-the-scenes stuff and maybe some repayment options that weren't there before. But really, yeah, the main goal, I think, with this rewrite of our rule was to be a little more borrower-friendly, I guess, and a little more interactive with our borrowers and kind of get more communication going again with them. So be quite so rigid as we were.
And as we're thinking about the Farm Service Agency and our farmers, anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, this isn't an FLP specific thing, but it is an important topic for a lot of our listeners. Dairy producers affected by milk loss from the H5N1 avian influenza can apply for assistance under the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program through January 30th, 2025. For any 2024 calendar year milk loss. To be eligible, producers must have had reduced milk production as a result of removal of adult dairy cows from the milking cycle due to a positive test of H5N1 infection. To apply, producers must provide documentation of a confirmed positive H5N1 test, either on an individual cow or a bulk tank sample. They must indicate the loss apparent date, which is the date of the positive sample testing, and certify to the number of adult dairy cows removed from the milking cycle by month. Additionally, through APHIS, producers can apply for assistance with cost of biosecurity planning and implementation, cost of shipping costs for influenza A testing, costs go along with heat treatment to dispose of milk, costs of reimbursements for veterinary costs, and also the purchase of personal protective equipment. And producers can reach out to their local FSA office for more details on those programs.
And as always, wanting to remind our producers where they can always find out more information about these programs and other programs from the Farm Service Agency.
Yeah, I'd recommend, anybody interested in FLP, start with their local FSA Service Center. We have 21 FSA Farm Loan Program sites in Kansas. So if your local office does not administer the program, they're going to be able to get you the contact information for the FLP site you'll need to work through. I just want to point out again that this is a new policy that we kind of discussed today, and it does not go into effect until September 25th, 2024. Our employees are still receiving training on the changes, so we don't have all the answers right now on all the specifics of the changes being implemented. So, I just want to ask our customers and producers to keep that in mind as we move forward, have maybe give our offices a little grace as we kind of learn what we're doing, and hopefully we'll have that information soon.
Josh, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
That was Kansas Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Chief Josh Ritter. In today's show notes on agtoday.net, there will be a link where you can find out more information about things from the Farm Service Agency, as well as a link where you can locate your closest service center. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain as he talks about how crop and livestock growers in total received less price-wise for their commodities in the latest USDA Agricultural Prices Report period, despite an increase in the Livestock Price Index.
Despite a rise month over month in what livestock producers received price-wise for their commodities, USDA's most recent agricultural prices report covering the month of July shows a total decline in prices received by ag growers. The 3.4% increase in livestock prices received from the prior month was fueled by higher poultry and egg prices, up over 6%, as well as an increase in meat animal prices received. Yet with the crop production index, the July prices received percentage was down 6.7%. Most crop commodity indexes reported lower prices month over month, led by vegetable and melon growers, receiving over 22% less price-wise for their commodities than in the prior month. The offset in the crop and livestock production indexes resulted in ag producers in total receiving 2.7% less in prices for their commodities. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we'll have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Wednesday show talking about tillage as a management tool with K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon and K-State soil scientist Augustine Obour. Logan, Augustine, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Shelby.
Augustine, as we're talking about this, wanting to specify what is strategic tillage as we're thinking about it in terms of long-term no-tillage systems. So, Augustine, in this context, what is strategic tillage?
I'll start off by saying no-till is a very good management practice for our production systems out here, especially in dryland environment. It's pretty good. It helps to conserve soil water. And most importantly, it provides residue to cover our soils to prevent it from eroding. You know, the wind blows all the time. So having residue to cover our soil is very important. But however, we're beginning to see challenges in our no-till systems where we have difficult to control weeds such as perennial grasses like tumbleweed grass, and we have herbicide-resistant weeds problems. So this is becoming an issue, and we've seen producers are going back, reverting to full tillage to control some of these challenges. So one thing that we are doing is to look at strategic tillage. So strategic tillage is something that we define as one-time tillage operation in an otherwise long-term no-till system, after which the field is returned to no-till. So this is just a one-time operation where you have an issue in your production system where you use this kind of a strategy to manage this problem. And in this case, perennial grasses and herbicide-resistant weeds, so that you go back to no-till. And if you do that, what will be the impact on soil and crop yield? So that is what our research is about, trying to look at this.
When it comes to strategic tillage, are there things that growers need to do to make sure they're not increasing weed populations?
So most of these weeds are shallow depth. So one of the things that you have to look at is the tillage depth. The depth at which we are doing this is very shallow, 1 to 2 or 3 inch depth. So if you do that, then you are able to control these weeds, especially windmill grass. If you do that, then you don't plant it. So if you till deep, you are essentially replanting the windmill grass, which can result in spreading. And there are other weeds, maybe Logan can add to that. If you go in and do a very deep tillage, you are just reseeding it or spreading it around.
Were there any soil concerns when it came to after the tillage?
Yeah, so the issue is when you go into there's concerns, of course. If you till a long-term no-till field? What is the impact on soil organic carbon? What is the potential impact on residue cover? And what is the potential impact, especially for wind erosion, which is a very significant issue in our environment? Looking at this, we are also thinking about what is the potential impact of if you go in and do this. So in our research, we measured all these properties, and since we've done that, we did measurements in when we started this experiment. We tilled the field one time in 2016. This is a long-term no-till plot that was started in 1975. So after we did the tillage pass in this experiment, we went in after 3 months to look at the soil properties. And we also did measurements after, I think, 6 years of this field has been tilled. So we did not see any difference in soil aggregate stability compared to the long-term no-till. We did not see any difference in soil organic matter content between the strategic tillage treatment and then the no-till treatment. Then we also, initially when we did this, one of the things that is a concern is you increase evapotranspiration that can impact soil water storage. We did measure that, and there was no difference in soil water storage between the no-till and the strategic tillage treatment. So we also look at wind erodible fraction, which is an indicator for the potential for wind erosion. When we did that, we did not see any differences between no-till and our strategic tillage treatment.
Were there really any differences when it came to yield?
We look at yields, winter wheat yields, and then we also look at sorghum yields. And we did not see any difference in yields in both grain sorghum and winter wheat. One thing that I want to point out, though, we did saw an increase in winter wheat yields with the tillage treatment, particularly where we have continuous wheat. So we did see an improvement in yields with the tillage treatment.
And Logan wanting to talk about occasional tillage strategies and dryland cropping systems. And in this context, what is occasional tillage?
I think it's important to start out in differentiating strategic tillage versus what we call occasional tillage. And strategic tillage really is a reactive approach. We identify that the problem is there. We're going out and we're doing this strategic tillage operation to address it, and then returning to no-till. There's no really set schedule of when we're going to come back in with a follow-up tillage pass. We're responding to that present issue. Occasional tillage is a little bit different in that the way that we've been practicing occasional tillage is more on a set schedule in a 3-year crop rotation. So we're primarily in this part of the world, we're thinking about that 3-year wheat, sorghum, fallow rotation. And so for this system, we're going out and we're doing 1 or 2 passes of tillage every 3 years in a set rotation here. So 2 out of 3 years, we're maintaining that no-till, but then going in and doing tillage at that time. In this way, on a schedule, we're trying to be a little bit more proactive, as you might think of it, where we're going in and doing this on a more set time frame.
And what impacts did occasional tillage have on soil properties? I
should say in our previous discussion on strategic tillage, that study has been going on there at our Agricultural Research Center in Hayes. For our occasional till research, we actually have sites in Garden City, Hayes, and Tribune. So we've been following that across all 3 environments, really capturing all of that broad geography of western Kansas. And across locations, we really don't see much impact in terms of our soil properties with our occasional tillage passes compared to that continuous no-till. So again, we looked at some physical properties related to aggregate stability, of course, compaction, those things that people think about when they think of, purposes for tillage. And we really didn't see much impact at all. There was some trend towards a little bit of a reduction in what we call penetration resistance, which is a measure of the amount of force required to penetrate through the soil. So it did look like we were kind of reducing that with our occasional tillage. So increasing a little bit of tilth there relative to no-till, but otherwise we didn't see much difference. So our aggregate stability was solid across treatments, as was soil organic carbon or organic matter in our other available nutrients. So very little difference across the board there.
To add something to what Logan said, this is not like we did it one time and measured this. This study has been going on since 2013, and these measurements were taken 8 years after this practice has been going on. So if we are going to see any negative impacts, it should be showing up by now.
From all this research, did you see any impacts with yield?
Yes, this study is a little bit interesting in that we're looking not just at the simple concept of occasional tillage, but also thinking about how it might be implemented in our cropping system. And so in this study, one of the things that we were looking at was the difference between going in with our tillage fallow going into wheat, so that third fallow year in the rotation going into winter wheat following grain sorghum, or having those tillage events happen after wheat harvest, so tillage of wheat stubble going to grain sorghum in that subsequent year. And what we found here is that when tillage occurred ahead of wheat, we really didn't see much of a yield impact with tillage compared to that continuous no-till. There was actually a little bit of a trend at Garden City here of getting a little bit better stand establishment that sometimes translated into a couple more bushels in some years. Here at Garden City, we didn't see that quite so much at Hayes or Tribune, but it was something we saw here. And then in terms of sorghum yields, we very rarely saw an impact if tillage occurred ahead of wheat. So if tillage was ahead of wheat, but we didn't till the wheat stubble, we saw no significant impact there, but we did see some yield suppression where tillage occurred of that wheat stubble going to grain sorghum. And that just really highlights the value of wheat stubble and the no-till practice of no-till for grain sorghum. So when we think about the implementation of either of these practices, we're really encouraging our dryland producers out here to utilize that opportunity going into establishing a winter wheat crop to implement this strategic or occasional tillage, where we either see no negative impact on wheat yield or in some cases that yield boost in wheat.
If people are wanting to find out more information on using tillage and the research you've done as a management tool, where can they find that?
Yes, so I would highly recommend that folks look at two recent publications that came out in our Agronomy e-Update newsletter that highlighted strategic and occasional tillage. In both cases, we included some links to our KAES, so Kansas Agricultural Experiment Station field reports. We've now had a couple of field reports go out from the research conducted on both of these, summarizing some of that data, both in the strategic and occasional till studies.
That was K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon and K-State soil scientist Augustine Obour. I will link the resources that they mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with another segment of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Dustin Pendell, Bob Larson, Brian Lubbers, Brad White, and Phillip Lancaster.
This listener question is from a person who was feeding heifers to finish them. So they're feeding heifers to finish them, but then their marketing plans have changed due to factors outside of their control. And now the discussion is, if I take those heifers, can I just back them down on feed and make them into breeding heifers? Bob, I'm going to start with you.
My first question is, if these feedlot heifers have been implanted with a growth implant, then I would say no. No, they can't turn into replacement heifers.
If they've been implanted at any time?
Yep.
What if it was right when we weaned them and put them in and they've been in there for 6 months?
Yep, that's exactly a time when you will cause some damage to reproductive potential. So honestly, around weaning, it's nearing puberty. That is really a time where if you implant them, you will negatively affect future fertility. And if they've been implanted a couple of times, then my decision is even easier. The other one to think about is, have they been on MGA or melangesterol acetate, which is a feed additive progestogen that is used in feedlot heifers to keep them out of estrus, keep them out of heat. And so it is possible to kind of flush that out of the system with enough time. And I've been in a couple of situations where we've tried to do that, and I'm pausing it didn't work as well as it ought to if you just read the textbook. If you read the textbook, they ought to clear it out of their system after a few weeks and then be fine. And some of them breed up and do okay, but it's not ideal.
Does it depend on how long they've been?
It does, yes, but I couldn't tell you exactly what a cutoff is or anything like that. But the longer they've been on it, then the less I'm excited about turning them into replacement heifers. So if they've been on an all-natural program, no MGA, no implants, then maybe.
So from the MGA perspective, then what's the normal length of time if you're going to use it in a estrus synchronization protocol? And that gives us some comparison of what's too long.
Right. So in a synchronization protocol, some of the protocols we use today are, about 14 days if we're going to use it in an estrus synchronization protocol. So you can go a little bit longer than that, but the longer and longer you go, the more we've affected the hormonal axis, and it takes a while to maybe bring it back to where it should be.
Yeah, so Dustin, I may go to you and say, so their marketing plan fell apart. As sometimes things happen, right? You've got an arrangement, it falls apart. What options would you use to maybe even explore other marketing plans, or what thought process would you go through in this type of situation?
Well, I think we've just heard that you might not want to pull them out for breeding stock, is what I gathered from there. So what are your plans at this point? I mean, you could leave them in the feedlot setting, I guess. That's an option. If you're not going to breed them, I don't know if there's a lot of other options. Maybe you could pull them back out, put them on grass for a while, but then you're going to maybe put them back into the feedlots. I don't know if there's a lot of options at this point if you're not going to breed them.
And I think some of it depends on how many does he have. If he's just got a handful, can he sell them locally or whatever? If he's got, if he's got a bunch, has he got enough for a pot truck that he can send to, packer, a large packer?
Sent to a commercial, either a commercial packer or a local packer. And I guess one of the things, and I want to go back to the breeding side, and Brian, I wanted to ask you, so as these heifers, does it depend how far in the feeding process we are? So if I've been on feed for 30 days versus I've been on feed for 130 days, relative to the amount of fat that has started to build up on these heifers, is that going to make a difference on whether they're, and let's say the caveats being the stuff that Bob mentioned, they're not on MGA, they haven't been implanted, I'm thinking about backing them off. What about that degree of fat? Does that matter?
Yes, right. We don't want fat heifers going into a breeding program. And yes, it matters. The time matters a lot, right? Because how fat they are matters a lot. So we certainly want them in good body condition score. So 30 days, probably no problem, right? And you might have to do some transitioning backwards to get, you basically have to do a reverse step down on the ration probably if you're going to send them out to pasture. But if they're really, really fleshy, and again, depending on how many you have, I mean, this might be one where your marketing's changed, but you're just going to have to leave them in that system. If they've been in the feedlot a long time, they probably just need to stay in that system and go to a commercial slaughter.
That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.